Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about this Walgreens closing that is happening in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts, because while superficially it is similar to the Safeway story that I covered, in reality, in actuality, this story is actually completely different, because in that particular story, what I discovered through my research into that particular situation was the fact that the Safeway was not closing in large part due to theft. It was actually closing due to the fact that they sold it to a developer who was trying to put in a bunch of new apartments. Well, in this situation, the thing that you're not being told, the thing that you're not hearing about, is that this is entirely rooted in theft, a long pattern of theft that has actually closed 4 different Walgreens in this specific area. However, what also makes this situation pretty unique is that you have black activists, including people from the NAACP, saying the quiet part out loud, which is, it is now the new standard of not being an evil white racist for these corporate titans to keep their locations open despite insane amounts of theft in that area. Yes, I'm not kidding about this. That's what they're actually arguing, and we're going to get into it. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
Walgreens is now closing in Boston in a predominantly black and Latino neighborhood. And tonight, neighbors who rely on that pharmacy are furious.
As WBZ's Tiffany Chan shows us, they say it's more than just an inconvenience.
So first thing I want to do right off the bat is to destroy the stupid left-wing argument that is immediately going to come up because the subject of this video is specifically a Walgreens being closed. Yes, a couple of years ago, a Walgreens CFO said that they cried too much about theft in a particular meeting, indicating that there were other problems in Walgreens as a company, and for whatever reason, and we all know the reason because the left wants to deny crime, this has been interpreted to mean that there is no theft at Walgreens. It does not occur at all whatsoever. Nobody is stealing nothing, and honestly, even if they were stealing, that does not hurt the company in any way, shape, or form. Theft is actually good for business. I don't know if you know that. In fact, I don't understand why these companies are even selling stuff when they could just let people steal. Obviously, that's nonsense. Obviously, you're overplaying your hand. Obviously, you're ridiculous and absurd. The second ridiculous point being put forward by the left wing is, of course, that shoplifting actually down, not up, according to this study. This study right here, which has 24 random cities and is designed specifically to show shoplifting decline since the pre-Black Lives Matter riots era, actually doesn't even show that. You have to take out New York City in order to get that conclusion, and you have a bunch of random cities that nobody even cares about when we're discussing this, and you're missing cities like Oakland and Philadelphia. But no, that does not mean that shoplifting is down nationwide, and specifically, even according to this study, shoplifting is up in Boston 12%, not down. So let's knock those two stupid points out of the way right away and get into the rest of this story.
The store shelves are empty and the signs are up, alerting customers that this Roxbury Walgreens will be closed for good at the end of the month.
How are they supposed to go get their medicine?
It's sparking concern and outrage from residents who rely on the Warren Street drugstore in this predominantly black neighborhood.
What happens to our seniors and our single parents that have no way to get to a Walgreens or another pharmacy anywhere near their home?
So this is actually the sad part of the tale, the sad part of the story that we should not just forget about, due in large part to the fact that this is a Democratic area and this is the result of Democratic Party policies. There are a bunch of seniors in this area. In fact, there's a bunch of senior housing in this area that under normal circumstances would definitely support not only one Walgreens, but the 4 that used to be there before. However, due in large part to the other circumstances that we're going to talk about a little bit later, these people are made to suffer because the city of Boston decided to protect the criminals rather than the seniors, rather than the vulnerable population. But they're protesting Walgreens and making demands of Walgreens rather than making demands of policymakers to change enforcement to actually go after the thieves that are making this business not viable. And by the way, I will demonstrate this to you with the data, with the numbers, with all the information by the end of this video so that there can be no doubt that this is in fact a theft situation that is closing down not only this Walgreens, but other pharmacies in the area and other previous Walgreens that have been closing down over the last couple of years.
And so we think it's insensitive, it's unjust.
Reverend Miniard Culpepper points to the senior housing developments just steps from the Walgreens and questions how the elderly will get their medications, especially after the pharmacy chain closed their stores in Hyde Park, Nubian Square, and Mattapan about a year ago.
So this is the part where I agree with the Reverend. He says it's completely unjust that this is happening, and yes, I agree. It is unjust that the city of Boston, like many left-wing cities, decided that retail theft is no big deal. They decided that shoplifters are just stealing food for their starving families, and now that is resulting in seniors going without their medicine, having to walk further, maybe not even getting it all together, and all the other problems that are associated with all of the pharmacies closing down in a predominantly elderly neighborhood.
Walgreens says they're downsizing, but the Reverend calls it nothing short of corporate greed. Why do you think they target black and brown communities?
I think because they get no pushback.
So first of all, the Reverend is an idiot for saying, oh, it's corporate greed, those darn corporations that don't want people looting their stores. And the reporter in this particular scenario asking the question, why do you think they target black and brown communities as if the black dollar isn't as good as anybody else's dollar, is absurd and ridiculous. Why do these communities target stores like Walgreens? Why are they allowed to steal without getting arrested, without facing the consequences? Why was this portrayed by people on the left wing who never have to deal with these issues, by the way, who live in way better neighborhoods than this, by the way, as some kind of justified retribution against the white man or redistribution of wealth and all of that, when we know that this has negative consequences like this? So no, the black community is not being targeted by Walgreens. The black community, or this one in particular, is targeting Walgreens, and the impact of that is hurting the elderly black people in this very same area. It's hurting the people who work at the Walgreens. It's hurting Walgreens as well.
Because they get no pushback. But they're now getting pushback.
Protesting alongside dozens of other frustrated customers fighting to keep this Walgreens open.
Again, we have this nonsensical victim mentality that, oh, they're not going to get any pushback for targeting the black community. Show me another community who protests the store for closing due to the theft in the community that the community is not advocating for the police to deal with. Show me another example of that happening with any other group of people. I'll wait. I'll be right here. Go find the link. Put it in the comments of this video if you have that example. It doesn't exist. You only get this kind of pushback from these type of civil rights or self-styled civil rights activists because they don't ever want to address the root of the problem. They're always looking for somebody to blame externally because he benefits from that. He gets to go on TV because of the fact that he is channeling the rage of the people, even though that rage is completely misdirected and it needs to be directed at the criminal population within this group of people.
Don't we need to have something in the community to help the black, the elderly, the sick? You know what I'm saying? They can't go far.
I'm sorry, but no. Walgreens is not a welfare agency. They're not a food pantry. They're not a food bank or anything of the sort. Walgreens is a business. They are not obligated to lose money in your particular area. It is not an obligation to serve the black community unless the black community is actually making that business profitable, and it's absurd for you to suggest that. And again, this is just the everyday entitlement we see from people, and by the way, what we see in our country when we have a lacking education system, that these people only see the final step, the Walgreens closing, rather than all the other steps that led there. And I understand if this is an average everyday person, that this is somebody who's upset, who's distraught based on the situation, that she's not going to deliver the most coherent, cogent points. And maybe these interviews are usually done for much, much longer. She brings up those points in the full context of the interview. But the thing is, this news segment is going with an angle, and that is the angle from the Reverend and the NAACP that Walgreens has hurt the black community by not allowing the black community to steal from Walgreens.
The problem boils down to accessibility, says former Boston NAACP president turned healthcare advocate Michael Curry.
The communities where they're closing these pharmacies are communities where people are disparately impacted by disease, 2 or 3 times higher rates in cancer, diabetes, heart disease. where life expectancy can be 15, 20 years less.
So I'm not joking. The word theft is never brought up throughout the whole course of this segment. It is not brought up by the local news or anybody that they're interviewing, and I find that incredibly interesting because what is brought up is that apparently this area has higher rates of disease, higher rates of elderly, aka higher rates of people who should be going to this Walgreens pharmacy, especially considering all the other pharmacy closings in and around this area, and thus serving as a satisfactory customer base in order to keep this place open. So if all of that is true, if this guy isn't just lying out of his you-know-where, then why is the Walgreens closing? What could be the determining factor to make this obviously should be profitable location not profitable all of a sudden? I wonder what that could be. Maybe because it's not mentioned, people actually watching this at home don't think of it, but the answer obviously is theft. Again, we will get into proving that in just a little bit.
While this isn't the only Walgreens or pharmacy chain set to close location in the coming weeks, Curry says it begs this question.
What is your obligation? What is your expectation as a corporate citizen to do what's right for those communities beyond what's right just for your bottom line?
What an absurdly stupid statement. First and foremost, even if Walgreens wanted to be a welfare agency for this particular black community, they're obligated by law to serve the people who own Walgreens, which would be the shareholders. The idea that if I have Walgreens stock, or, you out there in your pension have an index fund, that all of these companies need to bend over backwards to lose money, to let people steal, and hurt the people that are actually invested in them, is absurd and insane in every possible way. Again, Walgreens is not a food pantry. Walgreens is not a welfare program. They are a business, and if you're stealing from the business to the point where it goes out of business, that is on the people stealing and on the system that does not prosecute those people for stealing. Now, at the end of the segment, they say that they're going to have a rally to keep Walgreens open. Now, they should be rallying, of course, for the police to actually arrest and prosecute the thieves, and it would be a wonder how many stores actually stay open when they're not being looted constantly, and that rally did actually occur. And I'm not all that interested in the footage from the rally and the complaining because it's more of the same sentiment, but what I am interested is this specific portion where they actually camp outside this particular store and they film people going in to see whether or not there should be a customer base in order to support this store.
But after sitting in the parking lot observing for hours, I can tell you this location has a consistent stream of customers and sits next to a dialysis center.
That's 300 people from Harvard Street Health Center that comes to this Walgreens in our community. That's elderly, that's parents.
This group says they'll continue to rally until Walgreens changes their mind.
So right there we find out that the Walgreens is next to a dialysis center. You have all these senior areas. There's a health center nearby as well that sends 300 people over. And we also see complete and utter idiots saying hell no to Walgreens rather than wondering why this ideally located Walgreens with a large customer base seems to be closing for no reason. It seems rather curious that this is happening. I wonder if we actually have an explanation for this. Well, it turns out in an article that was actually written up by the study that said that theft is up in the city of Boston 12%, they actually cite some areas in the city of Boston that have specific issues with theft in particular, where it is elevated even higher than the city average. And wouldn't it shock you to find out that as of a year ago, when they closed those 3 other Walgreens in this particular area, that Roxbury is specifically named as one of the most troubled places in the city of Boston. Again, this is an article talking about the very same study that the left wing emphasizes over and over again to say shoplifting is actually down, even though they just grouped a bunch of random cities in order to artificially make it look like it was down. And it says right here, it's important to consider the broader impact of shoplifting on communities, citing it as a reason why Walgreens a year ago closed in Roxbury's Nubian Square. The store was one of 3 in Boston. Others were in Hyde Park and Manhattan that the pharmacy closed at the time. At the end of the day, it's not good for our public, for the economic vibrancy of our communities, for people to be able to rob our stores with impunity. So in this specific city, the city of Boston, according to the specific study of 24 cities that the left cites consistently to say that there's no shoplifting problem, we find out that the city of Boston has retail theft up 12%. On top of that, the specific neighborhoods that have the biggest problem, one of them is the very same neighborhood featured in this segment. On the other hand, we see a large customer base going to this specific Walgreens location, and this is because of the other closures kind of consolidated the business, plus other natural advantages based on the population that lives there, and yet the business is not viable. Now, Walgreens, for its part, is saying, changing shopping patterns, retail, contraction, whatever, anything to avoid making a specific claim about this area. And this allows people to go into full denial mode despite the proof in the pudding being in the taste. But unfortunately, the pudding aisle is vacant because all the thieves stole it in this particular area. Look, there's a lesson that I learned a long time ago, and I think it will serve all of you well out there in the audience. And that is, if something doesn't make sense, it's usually a lie. We are presented in this particular story a Walgreens location that is closing, and it's closing when you have a large senior population in the area who frequents that particular area. It's closing when you have a dialysis center right next door to the pharmacy. It's closing when you have another health center that sends over customer after customer to this particular Walgreens. When the local news goes out and films the store's day-to-day operations, you see customer after customer entering this location, and yet it's closing. And the explanation that we get from black activists is that Walgreens has decided that they don't want to make money in this particular area, that they're deciding for no reason, even though they're a corporation like many other corporations that chucked money at the BLM movement, that they want to hurt black people, they want to poke them in the eye because they're run by evil white racists, and that just doesn't make sense. They're not foregoing profit for evil white racism. Obviously, there's another explanation, and the only explanation that seems to make sense based on the pattern of stores closing in this particular area, based on the city's theft numbers, based on this particular neighborhood's theft numbers, is that theft is out of control, and that's because they're not prosecuting it. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Maybe Walgreens is actually run by evil white racists. If you believe that, let me know your wrong opinion and your argument for it down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about this Walgreens closing and why it's actually happening and the people who demand it stay open for welfare reasons. Till next time.